Welcome, listener. Tonight, we invite you to step backward in time, not to the bright, polished world of fantasy stories, but to the real Middle Ages, where life was slower, harsher, and far less glamorous than we might like to imagine. This is boring history for sleep, and this episode is called Why You Wouldn't Last a Day in Medieval Times and More. It's a calm, quiet look into what life was truly like centuries ago, for the average person. Not a king, not a knight, not a dragon slayer or a court magician, just someone like you or me, someone ordinary, trying to get through the day. And tonight, we begin our journey with a soft introduction into the myths, the nostalgia, and the deeply romanticized past. For many people, the phrase, medieval times, calls to mind a very specific set of images. A castle perched on a hill, its towers catching the golden light of sunset. Knights in polished armor riding noble horses across misty fields. A great hall filled with firelight, wooden tables, and roasted meat served on silver platters. Maidens in long gowns, music in the background, and the steady murmur of polite courtly conversation. It's a world we've seen again and again in books, movies, and television shows. There's something comforting about it, something charming in its simplicity. No cell phones, no traffic, no buzzing notifications. Just people living by the seasons, gathering their food, and defending their homes with swords and shields. But this version of the Middle Ages, the tidy one, the noble one, is not how most people actually lived. It's a softened version, filtered through centuries of storytelling. It's history with all the rough edges sanded down. Because the truth is, the real medieval world was uncomfortable. It was damp, dark, and dirty. It smelled bad. It was filled with noise, livestock, carts, shouting, coughing, and sometimes long silences, the kind that come with isolation, or fear, or the long, empty stretch of a winter night. If you were to suddenly wake up one morning in a 14th century village, it wouldn't feel like a dream. It would feel like a nightmare. Not a dramatic nightmare, just one made up of little miseries. Cold feet on a stone floor, a back sore from sleeping on straw, a mouth dry from last night's salted bread. No soap, no toothpaste, no privacy, no soft fabrics, no central heating, no modern medicine. The idea of living in the Middle Ages is appealing only when we imagine it from a safe distance, when we imagine being the exception. A lord in a high tower, a knight returning from battle, a lady with a harp, surrounded by books and time. But even the nobility suffered from lice, spoiled food, rotten teeth, and deadly infections. Even the kings had no toilets. The average person lived a life of hard labor and low expectations. They didn't read or write. Most never traveled more than a few miles from the place they were born. Their days were shaped by the sun and the seasons, and their nights were long, cold, and filled with uncertainty. There's a reason they looked to the heavens for meaning. The world around them was often incomprehensible, and religion offered the only explanation for much of what they endured. But this doesn't mean medieval life was always bleak. People still laughed. They loved. They raised children. They celebrated feasts and festivals. They found ways to survive and sometimes even to thrive, in their own way. There was beauty, and music, and meaning, just not the kind we often imagine. Still, it's important to understand that comfort, as we know it today, simply did not exist. And that's the core of what this episode is about. It's not a takedown of history, or an effort to scare you. It's not about mocking the past or pretending we're superior. It's about quiet honesty, a soft, steady unraveling of the myths we've grown up with. We're here to explore how different life truly was. Not just the facts, but the feelings. Not just what people did, but how it felt to live that way. To wear scratchy wool all year round. To eat thin porridge every morning. To lose a loved one to a fever that no one could name, let alone treat. The goal of this episode, and of this entire series, is to slow things down, to tell the story not of kings and crusades, but of the forgotten millions, the quiet ones, the peasants, the smiths, the washerwoman, the shepherds, the barefoot children gathering firewood. They are the ones whose daily lives made up the true shape of history. They are the ones we will walk beside in this slow, sleepy journey through the past. Each chapter of this episode will take us deeper into one part of medieval life. We'll wake up in a peasant's cottage. We'll eat a typical breakfast. We'll hear about illness, labor, weather, and worry. And along the way, you'll come to see, not with fear, but with calm curiosity, why you, and almost anyone alive today, probably wouldn't last very long if you suddenly found yourself living in the 1300s. But there's no need to worry. You're safe here, in the present. In your bed or your favorite chair. You're warm. You're clean. You have pillows, and plumbing, and time. This journey is only a thought experiment. You won't be asked to swing a hammer, or carry a bucket of water from a frozen stream. You'll just listen. And, if you like, let your eyelids grow heavy. Let your breath slow. Let the images form in your mind's eye, softly and without effort. You're not here to be tested. You're here to be gently reminded of just how far we've come, and to appreciate the little comforts we often overlook. So, before we begin, take a deep breath. Let go of the movies. Let go of the myths. Let the shining armor rust. Let the castle halls grow cold. Let the music fade into the sound of distant wind, and the crackle of a fire struggling to stay lit. We're not going back in time to be heroes. We're just going back to understand, to feel what life was like when the world was smaller, harder, and quieter. And if you drift off along the way, that's perfectly all right. Sleep, after all, is its own form of peace. Our journey into the true Middle Ages begins now. You open your eyes to darkness. There's no soft glow of a digital clock, no filtered sunlight through double-glazed windows, no hum of electricity, just darkness, cold and still. A small flicker of light seeps in through the wooden slats of a shuttered window. The air is heavy with the scent of damp wood, old straw, and the faint tang of smoke that's long since gone out. You're lying on a bed of sorts, if you can call it that. A simple wooden frame holds a sack stuffed with straw, coarse and uneven. It scratches your skin. The sack is torn in one corner, and some of the straw has spilled onto the cold stone floor beneath. You shift slightly, and the rustling echoes more loudly than it should in the silence of the room. It's morning, but there's no alarm to tell you that. No rooster crowing theatrically on cue. Just the subtle change in light. The pale promise of daybreak starting to creep through the cracks. You're not alone in the room. Far from it. The medieval home was a shared space. There are no separate bedrooms, no doors to close for privacy. You're in a single room, likely with your entire family. Parents, siblings, maybe even an elderly grandparent or a neighbor's child taken in for the winter. Everyone sleeps together, ranged on mats or straw beds, huddled for warmth. If you're lucky, there's a low wooden partition separating the humans from the livestock that sleep indoors during the colder months. A few feet away, a pig snores gently in the straw. Chickens stir. You hear the soft murmur of someone coughing in their sleep, and the sound of someone else turning over, muttering under their breath. Privacy doesn't exist here. The only space that's yours is the body you sleep in, and even that is under constant pressure from the world around you. It's cold, always cold. The walls, made of timber and daub, barely keep the wind out. The fire in the hearth went out hours ago, and no one dared waste wood on keeping it going through the night. Wood is too precious for that. You're itchy. It's not your imagination. The mattress you slept on is crawling with life. Fleas, lice, mites, they're part of daily existence. You don't even have a pillow, maybe just a bundle of cloth or hay, wrapped loosely in an old sack. Your blanket is a rough woolen one, scratchy and barely warm. You haven't bathed in days, probably weeks, not for lack of wanting, but because there's no place to do it. No bathtub, no running water, no soap as you'd recognize it. You might wash your hands, and faced with cold water from a bucket if you're lucky. That water was drawn yesterday from a nearby stream, and it's shared by everyone in the household. It's also used for cooking, cleaning, and maybe even rinsing clothes. Teeth aren't brushed. There are no toothbrushes, no toothpaste. A twig might serve as a crude scrubber, or you might just rinse your mouth with stale ale or water, if water is safe to drink at all. Often, it's not. There's no toilet. If you need to relieve yourself, you use a chamber pot, an open ceramic bowl tucked in a corner. You hope it was emptied last night. If not, the smell will tell you soon enough. In some cases, you might walk to a communal pit latrine behind the house or in the woods nearby. Either way, it's unpleasant. It always is. The day begins early, not because you want it to, but because the sun dictates the schedule. There are no clocks. Time is measured in the position of the sun, the length of shadows, the rhythm of chores. You rise with the light, and you work until it fades. Leisure is a rare luxury. Sleep is brief, often restless, interrupted by cold, noise, or hunger. As your eyes adjust to the dim gray of dawn, you slowly rise from the bed. Your back aches, not because you're old, necessarily, but because the hard labor of daily life wears the body down quickly. Most people begin physical work as young children. By the time you're in your 30s, your joints feel 50. Your hands are calloused, your feet tough and often bare. You pull on the same clothes you wore yesterday. You probably sleep in them, too, especially in the colder months. Undergarments are rare, and washing clothes is a labor-intensive task, usually saved for special occasions. Your tunic is made of coarse wool, dyed in dull brown or gray. It's functional, not fashionable. You may have only 1 or 2 outfits to your name. If you're a woman, your day might begin with preparing food, such as it is. Bread baked days ago, hard and chewy. Maybe some cold porridge from last night, thinned out with water. No sugar, no fruit, just oats, or barley, or millet, boiled until mushy. Salt, if you're lucky. If you're a man, you may head out to tend animals, or begin work in the fields. Children fetch water or gather firewood. Everyone has a task. Your feet hit the stone floor with a dull thud. It's freezing. No carpets, no socks, just the cold against your skin. The fire needs to be rekindled before anything can be warmed. That means gathering kindling and coaxing last night's coals back to life. If the fire went out completely, you'll need to find a neighbor to lend you a burning ember. Fire is precious and difficult to start from scratch. The house is dark, save for the small window, if your home even has one. Most don't. Glass is rare and expensive. Windows, if they exist, are covered with oiled cloth or wooden shutters. They don't let in much light, but they keep out some of the wind. The day ahead is already pressing in. Work begins with the sun and doesn't stop. If you're a farmer, you'll spend the day plowing, planting, or harvesting, depending on the season. If you're a craftsman, you'll set to work in a poorly lit workshop, or corner of the home, shaping leather, wood, or cloth. If you're a servant, your labor belongs to someone else entirely. The idea of resting in the morning, of easing into the day with coffee and silence, doesn't exist. You rise, you move, you work. Always. And this is just the beginning. The first hour of a medieval morning. No breakfast of eggs and toast. No shower. No phone to scroll through. Just hunger, cold air, and the simple knowledge that your body is needed for work, for chores, for survival. Yet somehow, this was normal. Routine. Entire generations lived like this and expected no different. They knew no central heating, no pajamas, no down pillows. What you're feeling, the stiffness, the chill, the ache, is simply the texture of daily life in the Middle Ages. And now, as we slowly move forward into the rest of this imaginary day, you may begin to understand, gently, calmly, without fear, why most modern people would struggle to last even a single day in that world. So take a breath. The sun has barely risen. The fire crackles faintly now. The floor is still cold, and the day is just beginning. But there's no rush. We'll move forward slowly. And if sleep is beginning to call you back, answer it. Let the sounds of the medieval morning dissolve. Let your breathing slow. There is more to explore, but it can wait. The past is patient. It will still be here when you wake. You wake with a dull ache behind your eye. It started as a small pain in your jaw yesterday, barely noticeable, just a slight pressure when you chewed. But now it has spread, creeping up through your temple like a slow burn. Your molar is swollen, throbbing. Each heartbeat sends a little shock through your skull. It's just a toothache. In the modern world, you might call a dentist, book an appointment, sit in a clean chair and receive anesthesia, x-rays, and precision care. You'd be home within a few hours, the pain a distant memory. But this is the Middle Ages. And here, a toothache isn't minor. It's not something to wait out or ignore. In this time, a toothache can kill you. You see, the medieval world doesn't know why illness happens. Germ theory does not exist. The concept of bacteria, of invisible organisms causing disease, is centuries away from discovery. Most people believe sickness is caused by imbalances in the body's humors, blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. This idea comes from ancient Greek and Roman physicians, especially Galen, whose writings dominate medical thinking for over 1,000 years. According to this theory, your aching tooth might be the result of too much heat in the blood, or too much moisture, or maybe it's divine punishment for a sin you didn't confess, or perhaps it's the influence of the stars, planets misaligned, causing pain as they drift silently across the heavens. There are physicians in some cities, but they are few, expensive, and generally reserved for the upper classes. Most ordinary people seek help from local healers, herbalists, monks, or barber surgeons, or they try to treat themselves. The remedies available are strange by modern standards. You might be offered a poultice made from herbs, animal fat, or even dung. You might be advised to chew cloves, or rinse your mouth with vinegar and honey. Some believe that holding a frog against the cheek can draw out the pain. Others suggest magical charms, spells whispered at night, small tokens tied around the wrist. If the pain worsens, the next step is often extraction. There are no sterile tools, no antiseptics, no anesthesia. A blacksmith or barber might be the one to pull your tooth, using crude metal pincers, heated over a fire and wiped down with a rag. You sit on a stool, gripping the arms, and hope it ends quickly. The pain is searing. Your screams go unheard, or perhaps just unacknowledged, muffled by the wind or the noise of animals outside. If the tooth breaks, or the root is left behind, the risk grows. Infection sets in easily. Even a small wound can be deadly. The body has no defense against bacteria it doesn't understand. There are no antibiotics, no sterile bandages, no IV drips. A simple cut from a rusty knife might fester, spread, and take your life within days. Tetanus is a silent killer. A splinter from a wooden cart, or a dirty wound from a farming tool, can introduce the bacteria into your bloodstream. Your jaw tightens, muscles seize, breathing becomes difficult. There's nothing anyone can do. Most die within a week. Sepsis is another unseen danger. A small abscess, a pocket of pus, can lead to fever, confusion, and death. People speak of bad humors or rotting blood, but they have no way to treat it. They might try bloodletting, slicing open a vein to let the illness escape, or apply a leech to the skin, hoping it draws out the evil. Bloodletting is one of the most common treatments of the time. It's used for everything: headaches, fevers, stomach pain, melancholy. The idea is to balance the humors by removing excess blood. But of course, losing blood weakens the body. In many cases, it does more harm than good. Still, it is performed regularly and confidently. People trust the process because it is all they know. Leeches are preferred by some healers. They are placed on the skin and left to feed. The sensation is strange, cold, then numbing, then painful. They fall off when full, and sometimes the wounds they leave become infected anyway. If the leeches don't help, prayer might. Spiritual healing is often the first and last resort. The church plays a major role in health. Illness is seen as a moral failing, a test from God, or a punishment for sin. You might be told to confess, to fast, to walk barefoot to a shrine or touch a relic. Pilgrimages are common forms of healing. People travel for miles to visit the bones of saints, hoping for a miracle. Monasteries sometimes act as early hospitals. Monks and nuns tend to the sick with herbs, poultices, and simple care. They offer rest, warm broth, and prayers. Their knowledge of plants, like willow bark for pain, or yarrow for bleeding, can help, but it's limited. Most treatments rely as much on faith as on evidence. Infections of the skin, boils, rashes, ulcers, are everywhere. There is no concept of hygiene, no soap in the modern sense. Bathing is rare and often discouraged. Some believe water opens the pores and lets illness in. Public bathhouses exist in some towns, but they are also places of rumor and scandal. More often, people wash only their hands and faces, if that. Doctors, if they can be called that, don't wash their hands between patients. Instruments are reused, uncleaned. Wounds are bound with dirty cloth. Surgery is done without gloves, often in the home, with only the most basic tools. A saw, a knife, some linen for binding, and then hope. Pain is accepted. Constant, dull pain. Backaches from labor. Joint pain from arthritis. Tooth itches. Headaches. Stomach pain from poor food and water. For most people, pain is normal. It is endured. There are no pills, no relief. Only sleep, when it comes. Or ale, if there is any to dull the edge. If you're sick enough, people begin to fear you. They might isolate you. They might assume you're cursed. In times of plague, whole homes are boarded up, marked with symbols. Entire families left inside, with no help, no escape. The fear of contagion, though not understood scientifically, is real and powerful. Children die young. Mothers die in childbirth. Fathers die from infected wounds. Life expectancy is short, not because people cannot live into their 60s, but because so many don't survive infancy, accidents, or simple infections. A fever can take a healthy person in a matter of days. And so, your toothache isn't just a toothache. It's a window into the frailty of the human body, in a time without knowledge or tools to protect it. A reminder that even the smallest pain could spiral into something far more dangerous. And yet people lived. They endured. They cared for one another as best they could. They experimented. They passed down herbal knowledge, shared treatments, prayed, hoped, and adapted. Medicine, as we know it, was born from these earliest practices, strange and misguided as they sometimes were. The Middle Ages were not devoid of compassion, just understanding. And without understanding, fear often fills the gaps. You sit quietly now, in your imaginary medieval room. The pain still throbs faintly, but you're warm beneath your blanket. Outside, someone is boiling herbs. A chicken clucks. The fire pops. The world is still turning. And if you find yourself drifting off to sleep, that's all right. The past is painful, but here, it's only a whisper. Let the ache fade. Let your breath slow. And remember, you are safe now, far away from that world. But you carry its history with you, always. The next chapter awaits. Your stomach growls. You've been awake for hours. The sun is well above the trees now, and your morning chores, feeding animals, fetching water, sweeping the dirt floor, have come and gone. It's time to eat. But in the medieval world, eating is not about pleasure. It's about survival. There is no breakfast as you know it. No eggs, toast, or warm oatmeal with cinnamon. There's no sugary cereal, no fresh fruit neatly sliced in a bowl. Instead, Your morning meal, if you get one, is a simple bowl of gruel. Gruel is not porridge. It's thinner, watery, made from whatever grains are available, barley, oats, or millet, boiled in water until it forms a pale, lumpy mixture. There's no milk, unless you keep a cow. Even then, milk is often reserved for making butter or cheese. There's no sugar, no spice, just grain and water. It fills your belly, but only just. Most peasants eat 2 meals a day, one in late morning and another in the early evening. These meals are nearly always the same, repeated day after day. Bread is the staple, not soft, fluffy loaves like you find in stores today, but coarse, heavy black bread. It's made with rye or barley, dark with ground husks and bits of straw, baked in communal ovens when fuel is available. Sometimes the bread is sour, sometimes it's stale, but it's food. With the bread, you might have soup, not a rich broth or creamy stew, but a thin cabbage soup, just greens boiled in water with a little onion or leek, maybe a few turnips. Salt is scarce. Meat is rarer still. Most peasants don't eat meat regularly. Chickens are valuable for their eggs. Cows are kept for milk. Pigs are only slaughtered once or twice a year, and every part of the animal is used: blood, organs, fat. Nothing is wasted. Fresh meat spoils quickly without refrigeration, so it's often salted or smoked when preserved at all. Spoilage is a constant threat. In warm weather, food goes off quickly. Bread molds, milk sours, vegetables wilt. Insects find their way into stored grain. Weevils, mites, worms, all part of the daily experience. You might not even notice anymore. Picking out a bug from your flour before baking is just another step in the process. Parasites are common. People don't understand how they spread. Tapeworms, roundworms, and lice live in the body, causing stomach pain, weakness, and fatigue. There's no cure, no medicine to rid the body of them, just herbal teas and hope. Malnutrition is quiet, but ever present. Peasants lack variety in their diets. Protein is limited. Vitamins are scarce, especially in winter. Scurvy, rickets, and other deficiencies slowly break down the body. Children often grow small and thin. Bones become brittle. Skin grows pale and rough. The hunger isn't always sharp. Often, it's dull, constant. A background ache in the belly that never quite goes away. You get used to it. You work through it. You don't complain. Everyone is hungry. You might grow your own vegetables if you have a bit of land. Leeks, onions, beans, peas. In summer, there's a little more to eat. In winter, the meals are grim. Root vegetables, dried beans, and whatever you've managed to store. Sometimes, nothing. The nobility lives in another world entirely. They eat meat every day. Deer, boar, rabbit, and pheasant. Their kitchens have spices brought from far-off lands: pepper, cinnamon, cloves. Their bread is white, soft, and finely milled. Their meals are served on trenchers, thick slices of stale bread used as plates. Servants bring courses one after another: meat pies, stews thick with marrow, sweet custards, and sugared fruits. But even the rich don't fully escape the dangers of the time. Food safety is guesswork. Spoiled meat is sometimes masked with heavy spices. Dishes are left out for hours during feasts. Water is rarely trusted. Ale is the standard drink, even for children. It's weak, brewed at home, and consumed throughout the day to stay hydrated without risk. Peasants drink ale too, when they can afford it. Otherwise, it's water from the village stream or well. Contamination is common. A dead animal upstream. Waste from the pigsty. You don't know it's dangerous, but you know it makes people sick. On feast days, maybe once or twice a year, you eat better. Bread fresh from the oven. Cheese, if it aged well. Maybe a bit of meat from the village pig slaughtered in autumn. The community gathers. Songs are sung. A barrel of ale is opened. It's a brief relief from the grind of daily life. A flicker of joy. Then it's back to gruel. Children eat the same as adults. There are no special snacks, no sweets. Honey is a rare treat, sometimes used to sweeten cakes on holidays. Fruit is eaten in season, picked from trees or bushes. Apples, berries, plums, if you're lucky. Food is never wasted. Leftovers are repurposed. Crusts become thickened soup. Bones are boiled again and again. Fat is rendered for cooking. Even crumbs are collected. Hunger teaches efficiency. Every scrap is used. In towns and cities, things aren't much better. There are markets, yes, but most peasants don't have coin to spare. You might barter, trading eggs for onions or bread for soap. The wealthier urban dwellers enjoy a bit more variety, but the dangers of spoilage, disease, and poor nutrition remain. Food handlers don't wash their hands. Animals wander the streets. Meat is sold openly, buzzing with flies. Meals are eaten with the hands, or with a knife. Forks are rare, viewed as strange or unnecessary. You eat from a bowl or trencher, wiping your fingers on your tunic. After the meal, scraps are tossed to the dogs or the poor, sometimes to the pigs. Still, people find comfort in what they can. Bread shared with neighbors. A pot of stew bubbling over a low fire. The warmth of a meal after a long, cold day. Food may be meager, but it's meaningful. Shared meals bring people together. They mark time. They remind you that you're not alone. And when you lie down at night, belly not full, but no longer empty, you feel the ache ease just a little. Now, in this quiet moment between thoughts, you begin to feel it. How different life was. How demanding. How delicate. How easily a poor harvest or a sick cow could turn a family's fortunes. How food wasn't chosen, but accepted. How eating was never just about taste but about endurance. You breathe slowly now, the imagined taste of black bread still in your mind, the thin cabbage soup cooling on the hearth, the sense of community, of hunger, of quiet strength. And if sleep begins to rise in you, like warm broth in a bowl, let it come. Let your breath slow. Let your limbs soften. The fire has gone low. The meal is done. And tomorrow, you'll rise again for gruel. It's morning again. The fire has burned down to ash. Your thin blanket has slipped from your shoulder. The chill of the stone floor seeps up through your feet as you stand, slowly, in your drafty cottage. Outside, mist clings to the grass, but inside, it's time to dress. You reach for your clothing, but don't expect cotton pajamas or soft, stretchy leggings. In the medieval world, clothing is not made for comfort. It's made for function, for durability, for necessity, and most of all for warmth. Your daily garments are made almost entirely of wool. Heavy, coarse wool, scratchy against the skin, thick enough to protect you from cold winds, but hardly what you'd call pleasant. The fabric itches. It rubs. It holds on to damp and dirt. It smells faintly of the sheep it came from, and of smoke, and of old sweat. Wool is the fabric of the common folk. If you're lucky, your outer tunic has been brushed with teasels, a spiny plant, to soften it just a bit. But it's still itchy. Beneath the tunic, you might wear a linen shift, a simple, long shirt made from flax fibers. Linen is smoother, cooler against the skin, but expensive and hard to make. You might only own one shift. 2. If you're wealthy, they're washed when they get truly dirty. Otherwise, they're worn over and over again. As for underwear, not quite what you're used to. The idea of undergarments as we know them, briefs, brass, boxers, didn't exist for most medieval people. Men might wear linen braies, a kind of loose-fitting short made of cloth, tied with a cord at the waist. Women typically wore nothing beneath their shifts, aside from stockings held up with garters. There are no elastic waistbands, no underwear, no padded anything. In winter, layers are added. A second tunic, a hood, a cloak, woolen stockings, mittens, if you have them. Footwear is basic. Leather shoes with flat soles and little support, stitched by hand and easily soaked through. There's no insulation, no waterproofing. If your shoes get wet, Your feet stay wet all day. And once you're dressed, the discomfort begins. It starts with the itch. Wool against bare skin. The linen shift clinging, where sweat collects. You scratch your arms. You shift your shoulders. You try to ignore it. Then, there are the lice. Tiny, relentless, always present. Lice live in the seams of your clothing, feeding on your skin and laying eggs in your hair. Everyone has them, rich or poor, men, women, children. There are no shampoos, no deleting sprays, no washing machines. Comb them out, and they return. Boil your clothes, and they cling to the bedding instead. Some people even keep a special comb just for removing nits, passed down like a family tool. Fleas are common, too. They live in the rushes on your floor, in your straw mattress, in your cloak. They bite your ankles while you sleep. They jump when you stir. They carry disease, but no one knows that yet. You scratch again. The discomfort is constant, part itch, part damp, part general irritation, but you ignore it, because there's no alternative. This is simply how it is. Washing your clothing is no easy task. You can't throw things in a machine. You can't hang them on a dryer rack indoors. Laundry day means dragging your garments to a stream, a wash tub, or a barrel. Soap is made from lye and animal fat, harsh on skin, rough on fabric. You scrub your woolen tunic with a rock or wooden paddle, rinse it with freezing water, and hang it in the sun to dry. Slowly. It takes hours. If it rains, your clothes stay wet. If it freezes, they stiffen. You still wear them because you only have one set, maybe two. You mend your garments constantly. Needles are precious. Thread is spun from flax or wool. A tear in a tunic is patched. A worn heel is stitched. A missing button, or rather, a missing tie, is replaced. There are no closets full of options. No fashion trends to follow. You wear what you have, until it falls apart. Textile work is an unending chore. If you're a woman, you spin thread every day. At night, by firelight, while walking, while watching children, a distaff at your side, a spindle in your hand. Spinning wool into thread, thread into fabric, fabric into clothing. Once a piece of fabric is finished, it must be cut and sewn, hand-stitched, hemmed, fitted. This is slow, deliberate work, done with care, not speed. Clothing is valuable. You don't waste a scrap. Even noble garments are uncomfortable. The rich wear finer materials, dyed wools, silks from abroad, linen of higher quality. Their clothes may be lined with fur, embroidered with thread of gold, but they are still heavy, still warm, still made without elastic, zippers, or breathable fabrics. Corsets, tight hose, long gowns trailing in the mud. Style matters more in court than comfort. Fashion is used to show rank. Sumptuary laws dictate who can wear what. Purple and gold are reserved for royalty, fur for the wealthy. Embroidered shoes, jeweled brooches, and long sleeves that drag on the floor, they're all symbols, but they aren't easy to wear. And of course, even nobles have lice. Bathing is rare, not just because of time or effort, but because many believe bathing is dangerous. That hot water opens the pores and allows disease to enter. Some bathe once a year. Others use only a damp cloth. Perfume and flowers help mask odors, but the smell of unwashed bodies is common. The scent of the Middle Ages is sweat, smoke, wool, and soil. There are bathhouses in some towns, but they are often associated with scandal. In villages, people might bathe in streams, or not at all. The poor scrape dirt from their skin with rough cloth. Soap is saved for laundry. Hair is washed less often than hands. And so, each day begins the same. You pull on your heavy, scratchy tunic. Tie your belt. Wrap your stockings. Place your hood over your head. You feel the familiar pinch of a flea on your neck. You ignore it. You scratch your wrist. The fabric is damp where it dried near the fire. It smells of wood smoke and sheep's lanolin, and it will itch all day. But this is what life demands. Clothing protects you from the wind, from thorns in the fields, from the chill of dawn, from the gaze of others. It may not be soft, it may not be clean, but it does what it must. And like everything else in this time, it is made by hand, slowly, carefully, repaired again and again, not discarded, not replaced. You shift in your bed now, the idea of a wool tunic scratching at your imagination. You breathe more slowly. The lice and fleas are far away, just memories from another world. A world where comfort was rare, but resilience was common. Where people wore their hardship quite literally on their sleeves. So let your arms rest now. Let the itch fade from your thoughts. The seams are looser here, the fabric softer. And in this quiet place between dreams, you need wear nothing at all. The rooster calls again. Another day begins. You stretch, if you can, though your back aches. You haven't lifted anything yet, but the pain is already there. It never really leaves anymore. Just a dull, grinding presence beneath the skin, quiet in the night, louder by noon. This is medieval labor, and it does not wait for rest. You are not a specialist. You are a body, a tool. The sun rises and you begin. There are no weekends, no paid time off, no insurance, no one to complain to. If you are a peasant, your life revolves around the land. You work not to earn a wage, but to survive. The fields call to you as soon as the light comes. They must be plowed, planted, weeded, harvested, again and again, year after year. Farming is not gentle work. It means lifting heavy sacks of grain, dragging wooden plows through stubborn soil, bending for hours in the heat to pull weeds by hand. There are no gloves, no ergonomic tools. Your fingers split from the cold in winter, and blister in the sun come summer. If you're lucky, you have an ox to help. If not, you're the ox, and the work never ends. One task leads to another. Threshing, winnowing, collecting water, stacking firewood, carrying buckets, kneeling in the dirt, lifting with your back, again and again, until the joints grind and the spine curves. Children are not spared. They begin working early, sometimes as young as 5 or 6. They chase birds from the fields, collect eggs, carry bundles of sticks. By 7 or 8, they're helping in the same tasks as adults. Their small hands might be better suited to delicate tasks, like threading a loom or turning a spit. There is no childhood in the modern sense. There are no playgrounds, no schooling for most, no protection, only duty. If you live in a town, you might be apprenticed to a craft. Maybe you're a blacksmith. You spend your days at the forge, hammering hot metal on an anvil. The air is thick with smoke and ash. The heat is constant. Sparks land on your arms. Your hands are calloused and burned. Your ears ring from the clang of steel. Or you might be a tanner. You take animal hides and soak them in water, lime, and urine. The smell is overwhelming. It stays in your skin, your clothes, your hair. You scrape the flesh from hides with a curved knife, working beside vats of rotting matter. Tanners are often forced to live on the edge of town, downwind. Every trade has its cost. Weavers go blind working by candlelight. Millers lose fingers to grinding stones. Masons fall from scaffolds. Carpenters breathe in sawdust and splinters. Potters burn their hands in kilns. Every tool is a danger. Every day brings risk. And when you're injured, there is no help, no workers' compensation, no physical therapy, no laws to protect you. If you're lucky, your neighbors might bring food while you recover. If you're unlucky, you lose your job or your life. A simple cut can become infected. A broken leg might never heal properly. A fall from a ladder can mean permanent disability. And still, you're expected to work. There are guilds, yes. In cities, craftsmen form associations to protect their trade. But they don't protect the weak. They protect the craft itself. If you can't keep up, someone else will take your place, and you are quickly forgotten. If you're a woman, you work just as hard, often more. In addition to helping in the fields, you tend to the home. You spin thread. You bake bread in heavy clay ovens. You carry water from the well, wash clothes by hand, care for children, sew garments, tend gardens, and feed livestock. There is no time to rest. Your work begins before sunrise and continues by candlelight. Even during childbirth, many women continue working until the moment labor begins. And after, they return to their duties within days. There is no maternity leave, no hospital bed, just life in whatever strength you can gather. Midwives assist when they can, but they are not trained doctors. If labor goes wrong, there is little anyone can do. Death in childbirth is common, so is stillbirth. And yet, life continues. Children, too, are part of the labor force. They haul water, sweep floors, fetch tools. They tend younger siblings. They run errands. If they work in a shop or on a farm, they may face the same dangers as adults, with smaller bodies and less experience. No one asks if they are tired. No one expects them to play, because play is a luxury. Time is measured in tasks, not in hours. You do what must be done, until it is finished, or until you collapse. There are no clocks, no schedules as we know them. The sun tells you when to start. The church bell, perhaps, when to stop. But often, work continues well into the night. If you're a servant, your labor is directed by others. You wake before your master, prepare their clothes, fetch their food, clean their chamber pot, muck out the stables, chop wood for the fire, sleep in the hall, if you're allowed, eat scraps from their table. You have no privacy, no voice, just commands. If you displease them, you may be beaten, dismissed, accused. There is no human resources department, no legal protections. Your place is beneath them, and everyone reminds you of it. Your body ages fast. By the time you are 30, you feel 50. Bones ache, teeth rot, joints swell, fingers curl from arthritis. Your back bends from years of lifting and stooping. You rise each day with a groan, not because you're lazy, but because your body is worn down. And yet, people continue, because they must. Because there is no other choice. Because survival is not guaranteed. It is earned, one aching step at a time. But despite all this, there are moments of dignity. A shared meal after harvest. Laughter in the workshop. A child helping her mother knead dough. A blacksmith's apprentice watching the iron take shape. A mason running his hand along the wall he built. Pride exists, even in hardship. But it comes slowly. It comes through pain, through repetition, through the small victories of hands that refuse to stop. So now, as you lie still, listening to the imagined clang of hammers and the creak of the plow, you begin to understand. Work, in the medieval world, is not a part of life. It is life. You are not defined by your dreams, your hobbies, or your leisure. You are defined by your labor, by what you produce, by how much your body can give, and give and give. And when it gives out, there is no rest home, only silence. But not for you, not tonight. Tonight, you rest in a safer place, in a softer bed. You are not hauling buckets. You are not tanning hides. You are not scraping your knees on a cold stone floor. You are breathing deeply now, safe, still. And your hands, for once, are free. The town is quiet at dawn, but not peaceful. The silence feels uneasy. There's no chirping of birds, no laughter of children, only the shuffle of footsteps and the low hum of whispered prayers. Something feels off. In the air, in the streets, in the people's eyes. This is not an unusual feeling in medieval times, because illness is never far. You live with disease like others live with weather. It is simply part of life, expected, endured, and never truly understood. In the medieval world, sickness is constant. It's there in the crowded streets and cramped homes, in the tainted water and spoiled food, in the rats that scurry beneath your bed, and the fleas that bite your ankles. No one knows of bacteria. Germs are a mystery, but their consequences, all too familiar. A child coughs in the night, and doesn't wake. A neighbor stumbles, pale and sweating, and is gone by morning. No one is surprised, because in this time, to be alive is to be surrounded by death. Towns are breeding grounds for illness. Streets are narrow, clogged with waste. Chamber pots are dumped from windows. Livestock wander through open marketplaces. Horses relieve themselves where people walk. Flies gather on meat left in the sun. And the smell, ripe, layered, and foul, hangs heavy. People breathe it in every day, and they believe it makes them sick. The dominant theory of illness is miasma, bad air, foul smells, invisible clouds of corruption rising from decay. People think disease comes from these poisonous vapors, and in a way, they're not wrong. The rot does bring illness, but they don't know how or why. There is no hand-washing, no antiseptic, no antibiotics. Hospitals exist, but they are not what you imagine. They are often religious houses, places of prayer more than medicine. You are laid on a straw bed, offered holy water, perhaps bled with a knife to balance your humors. You may be treated with herbs, with hope, with hymns, but little else. If your fever worsens, there's little anyone can do. Physicians, when available, rely on astrology, urine charts, and the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. They diagnose based on complexion and mood. They might prescribe purging or leeches. They do not wear gloves. They do not wash their hands. And then there is plague. Not a rumor, not a one-time tragedy, but a recurring nightmare. The Black Death, as we call it now, first sweeps through Europe in the 14th century. It arrives in 1347, carried by merchant ships, riding on fleas, hiding in rats. It kills quickly. Within days, the infected are covered in painful, swollen lumps, buboes, under the arms, in the groin, round the neck. Fever follows, vomiting, delirium, blackened skin, and death. People die in the streets, in their homes, in churches, in piles. Entire villages are emptied. Fields go untilled. Markets fall silent. The death toll is staggering. Historians estimate that up to half the population of Europe may have perished in just a few years. Everywhere, there is fear. People flee cities. Others barricade themselves inside. Some believe the end times have come. Some blame outsiders. Some blame sinners. But many turn to the church. Disease, they believe, is a punishment from God for greed, for pride, for fornication, for some sin too great to name. If you are sick, perhaps it is because you deserve to be. This belief adds weight to suffering. Not only do you feel the pain of the body, but the burden of guilt. You confess, you pray, you flagellate, whip your own back to show humility. But the plague doesn't care. It returns again and again, not just in 1347, but in waves. Every few decades, towns recover, only to be struck again. Survivors bury loved ones multiple times in a lifetime, and still, there is no explanation, no cure. In the absence of understanding, superstition grows. People wear plague charms, amulets, and herbs tied around the neck. They burn incense to cleanse the air. Doctors don long cloaks and strange beaked masks filled with flowers and vinegar, hoping to ward off the miasma. It rarely helps. Yet not all illness is as dramatic as plague. Most suffering comes from the everyday diseases, the ones we barely think about now. Dysentery from bad water, tuberculosis that lingers in the lungs, measles, smallpox, influenza, typhoid, each one deadly, each one common. You catch a chill in winter, your body aches, you sweat through your blanket. No one knows it's pneumonia. A splinter festers in your hand. It swells, then blackens. Then you lose your arm or your life. Your child coughs for days, then stops breathing. You bury them without understanding why. Illness is democratic. It touches rich and poor alike. Though the poor suffer more often, crowded together, underfed, unwashed. The rich can flee to country estates. The poor stay where death finds them. And so, people grow used to it. They stop asking why. They see illness not as something to be solved, but something to endure. A trial. a reminder of mortality, a reason to pray. Church bells ring for the dead constantly. Some ring so often that they crack. There is no quarantine as we know it. Some towns experiment with isolation. Ships are kept offshore for 40 days. 40 giorni, from which we get the word quarantine. But it is inconsistent, often too late. Doctors carry posies of herbs. People burn juniper to purify the air. Nothing works. So you live in fear, not always consciously, but always there. A cough behind you on the road. A neighbor who hasn't been seen in days. A cart piled with bodies. You avert your eyes. And you keep working. Because what else can you do? Today, we live with clean water, with antibiotics, with vaccines, with hospitals, with knowledge. We forget what it means to fear every illness. But they did not forget. Every sniffle held a whisper of death. Every fever a warning. Every prayer a plea. So tonight, as you lie in bed, safe and still, know that your world is not their world. You have warmth. You have medicine. You have science. They had none of it. Only faith, and fear, and fumbling attempts to survive in a world that never stopped trying to end them. So breathe in deeply now. There is no miasma here. No fever. No swelling. No knocking at the door. Only quiet. Only safety. Only sleep. The world feels still tonight, but not so long ago. Stillness did not mean peace. It meant knowing your place and staying there. In the medieval world, the shape of society was fixed, rigid and steep like the stone towers of a distant lord's castle. There were no ladders to climb, no rungs to reach for. You were born into a place, and that place was yours for life. At the very bottom were the serfs, tied to the land, tied to duty, tied to a life not of their choosing. You weren't a slave, not exactly, but you were not free either. You couldn't leave the village without permission. You couldn't sell your land. It wasn't really yours. You owed labor to your lord, plowing his fields, repairing his fences, grinding your grain at his mill, for a fee. And you paid taxes, often in kind, chickens, barley, a portion of your harvest. If the harvest was poor, you still paid. If your child died, you still owed labor. If your roof caved in, no one came to help. You were expected to endure. The manorial system ruled over everything. Your lord was not just a landowner. He was your judge, your protector, and your overseer. He provided land to live on, and in return, you served. It was a deeply unequal trade, but there was no one to negotiate. Lords lived in manor houses, stone-built and often fortified. You might see them only rarely. More often, you dealt with the reeve, a local official who enforced the rules. He was one of your own, but with power given from above. Above him were knights, nobles, bishops, dukes, a king, perhaps, but distant and unseen. Fealty was the law of the land, a binding oath, a system of promises wrapped in obligation. A knight swore fealty to his lord, that lord to a higher noble, and so on, until it reached the top. But the higher you were, the fewer people you answered to, and the more power you held over those beneath. A noble might command hundreds of people, without ever lifting a finger in labor. He ruled by right of birth, not by wisdom, not by merit, but because he was born noble. If you were born a serf, there was almost no way out. No university, no business to start, no hope of promotion. Literacy was rare. Education was a privilege of the church or the nobility, and even the church had its own hierarchy. Yes, some escaped, a lucky few. A clever merchant might rise. A younger son might become a monk or scribe. A knight might earn glory in battle. But these were exceptions, not the rule. For the vast majority, social mobility was a dream never dreamed, because most didn't even know it was possible. The law reflected this structure. If a noble and a peasant committed the same crime, they faced very different consequences. A peasant caught stealing bread might be whipped, branded, or have an ear cut off. A noble might pay a fine. Your birth determined not only your status, but your legal value. In some cases, your very life had a price. the word gild, or man price, paid if you were killed. The higher your status, the higher the fine. A noble's death might require 100 head of cattle, a serf's perhaps just a few. The courts were not blind. They were obedient to power. Trials often depended on oaths, reputation, and divine signs. You might undergo a trial by water, tossed into a river to see if you sank, or by fire, carrying hot iron to prove your innocence. The system favored those who had allies and influence. The poor had neither. And so, justice was something you hoped for, not something you expected. Even your clothing was dictated by your class. Sumptuary laws forbade certain fabrics, colors, and ornaments. Only nobles could wear velvet or ermine. Only the wealthy could afford deep-dyed blues or bright reds. You wore what your station allowed: coarse wool, simple cuts, earth-toned dyes. To dress above your rank was not just frowned upon, it could be punished. And yet, within this system, there was order. You knew your duties. You knew your place. You belonged to something larger, a village, a manor, a web of fealty and faith. It brought security, in a way. You were not alone. You were part of a structure older than memory, a tree whose roots wound deep into the soil of time. But it also brought stagnation. Ambition was not useful. Innovation was not rewarded. Your path was set when you were born. And for most, that path was narrow, hard, and dimly lit. Still, life found moments of meaning. You had your kin, your neighbors, your festivals and feasts. You could be proud of your plowed field, your stitched tunic, your bread, baked from grain you harvested with your own aching hands. There was dignity in survival, but always beneath someone else's rule, always under the eye of a system that saw you not as an individual, but as a rank, a role, a resource. And so, when you close your eyes tonight, remember, you live in a world where paths can change, where birth does not bind, where courts are flawed but strive for fairness, where you can read, write, speak, move, choose. These are not small freedoms. They are enormous. They were unimaginable to most who lived before. So breathe deeply now in that freedom. You are not a serf. You are not bound by fealty. You owe no labor to a lord who claims your life as his due. You owe only this moment to yourself. And it is quiet now. You are still. You are safe. And sleep can come, softly, gently, freely. The candle burns low. In the stillness, you might feel a certain peace, quiet, unbroken. But in the Middle Ages, even silence could feel heavy, because in every quiet breath, there was also fear. A fear not of what you could see, but of what you couldn't. In medieval life, the church was everywhere, not just a place you visited on Sundays, not just a building in the village square. It was the center of everything: birth, marriage, death, illness, harvest, famine, war. Each was touched by the church. It was the keeper of time, the judge of morality, the arbiter of salvation. It told you how to live, and it told you what would happen if you failed. Hell, not just a metaphor, but a vivid, constant presence. Flames, demons, eternal punishment. From the time you were old enough to speak, you were told, sin leads to suffering, disobedience leads to damnation, and no one is without sin. The church gave answers, but it also asked obedience, and that obedience ran deep. Priests held authority not only over the soul but over daily life. They blessed crops, heard confessions, read the Latin scriptures that no one else could understand. They were seen as spiritual shepherds, and often earthly lords as well. To question the church was not just rebellion, it was heresy. And heresy could cost you everything. If someone said you doubted a doctrine, just whispered it, your name might be passed to the local bishop, or worse, to inquisitors, men sent to root out impure belief. They asked questions not to understand, but to convict. A heresy trial did not require hard evidence, only suspicion. If you were accused, you might be held without knowing your crime. You might be tortured, pressed for confession, told to name others, a neighbor who spoke strangely, a friend who skipped mass. There was no lawyer to defend you. There was only repentance, or punishment. And punishment could be as mild as public penance, or as final as fire. You might be burned at the stake, not for what you did, but for what you believed. In such a world, superstition thrived. People believed that illness could come from sin, that storms were signs of divine anger, that strange births or comets in the sky foretold God's wrath. Every event held meaning, and because fear was constant, so was ritual. You crossed yourself at the sight of a church. You whispered prayers when lightning struck. You kept relics close, bones of saints, cloth fragments, wooden splinters said to be from the true cross. Relics were powerful. They were touched, kissed, prayed to. People believed they could heal the sick, ward off evil, even protect entire towns. To see one was a blessing, to own one a fortune. But the church controlled access. It guarded its relics, displayed them only at special times. The faithful came from miles around, hoping for a glimpse, a cure, a miracle. These journeys were known as pilgrimages, and they were acts of devotion. A pilgrimage might take months, even years. You would walk from your village to a distant cathedral, Santiago de Compostela, Canterbury, Rome, or even Jerusalem. You might sleep in barns, suffer blisters, fend off thieves, all for a glimpse of a saint's shrine. It was not a vacation, it was penance, proof of faith, a way to show God your humility, but also, perhaps, a way to earn divine favor. Because salvation was uncertain, people feared purgatory, a place of torment for the not quite damned, a fiery waiting room for the soul. Prayers, indulgences, and pilgrimages might reduce your time there. So would donations to the church. The wealthy paid for masses to be said in their name after death. The poor simply prayed. The balance of fear and ritual shaped everything, and the calendar was filled with holy days. There were saints' days, fasts, feasts, vigils, and processions. There were rules for what to eat, when to kneel, how to bury the dead. Even sleep was touched by prayer. Compline, the final service of the day. Ask God to protect you through the night. Because dreams, too, could be visited by spirits. Demons might whisper temptations. Angels might offer guidance. Your soul wandered even while your body lay still. And so, even rest was not always restful. Many feared the apocalypse. It loomed large in imagination, a final judgment, the return of Christ, the end of the world. Signs were searched for: war, famine, eclipse, earthquake. Anyone might be the beginning of the end. And if you were not prepared, well, that fear was enough to keep people in line. But the church was not only fear, it also brought beauty. Cathedrals that soared to the sky, monks who illuminated manuscripts with gold leaf and devotion, chants that echoed through stone halls, timeless and slow, a language of the sacred, both distant and deeply present. It brought order to chaos, but that order came with weight. You could not read the Bible, only priests could. You could not question a teaching, only scholars could, if they dared. You could not interpret a dream, or ask about other faiths, or wonder aloud if something didn't make sense. To doubt was dangerous. So you stayed quiet. You followed. You feared. You hoped. And in the end, you died as you lived, on your knees, praying for mercy. So now, as your room darkens and silence returns, remember this: you are free to ask questions, to believe or not, to seek meaning in your own way. No one will accuse you of heresy. No one will demand penance for your thoughts. You can read, you can learn, you can wonder. That freedom is precious. In the medieval world, it was unknown. So rest now in the calm of a gentler age. No bells ring tonight. No trial waits. Only peace. Only breath. Only sleep. Stone, wood, thatch, mud. In the medieval world, architecture wasn't just background. It wasn't scenery. It was destiny. Where you lived, and what you lived in, said everything about who you were, not just to others but to yourself. It shaped how you worked, how you slept, how you ate, how you worshipped. And more than anything else, It shaped how power was distributed and seen. You could not walk far in medieval Europe without spotting a castle on the horizon, a great mass of stone, rising above the trees and fields, perched on a hill or carved into rock, imposing, watching. Castles weren't built for comfort, they were built for control. They reminded everyone below who ruled. They were military strongholds, but also psychological ones. Their thick walls weren't just for defense, they were for intimidation. If you were a peasant, the castle was not your refuge, it was your burden. It was the place you owed rent, where justice, harsh and biased, was administered, where tithes were collected, and where power lived far above you, looking down. Everything about a castle said, "You are small, and I am not." Inside those walls, lords and ladies lived lives that were cold but elevated. Their great halls were drafty, echoing chambers of stone. Fires roared, but did not warm the far corners. Windows, if they existed, were narrow and glazed with horn or oiled linen. Glass was rare and precious. Furniture was sparse and heavy. Beds were raised, with heavy curtains to trap warmth. Tapestries lined the walls, not just for beauty, but to block the chill. It was not luxury as we imagine it now, but it was distance from labor, from hunger, from the raw dirt of village life. Now step outside those high walls, into the peasant's world, a single-room cottage, low and crooked, its walls made from wattle and daub, woven sticks plastered with mud and straw. The roof is thatched, brown and sagging in the rain. There are no windows, only a small opening for smoke. The floor is dirt. Inside, it is dark, always. Light comes from the fire, or from a door left open during the day. There is no chimney. The smoke drifts out. Where it can, it stains the rafters. It coats your lungs. You and your family sleep here. You cook here. Your animals, goats, chickens, maybe a pig, share the space. You live in your own breath, in the stink of bodies, manure, and wet earth. The walls do not keep out the cold, or the rats, or the noise. But this is home. You built it, or someone in your family did. You patch it when it leaks. You sweep the dirt floor, knowing it will never be truly clean. You hang herbs to dry from the beams, tie onions in bunches, stack firewood where you can. There is no privacy, no space to retreat. You live tightly, physically and socially. Your neighbor's voice carries through thin walls. Your baby's cry is heard by all. Your life is not just visible, but public. And yet, even here, architecture governs your day. There is no plumbing, no running water. You draw water from a shared well. You relieve yourself in a trench, a bucket, or a nearby hedge. At night, you use a chamber pot, emptied each morning. There is no insulation, so when it's cold, it's cold. You sleep fully dressed, wrapped in what little cloth you own. And in the summer, the heat is stifling. The air is thick. The flies come. The animals sweat. You try to sleep, but the room does not breathe. Your ceiling is low, and it stays that way, because unlike today, architecture doesn't evolve based on comfort or innovation. It reflects tradition and hierarchy. The rich build up and out. The poor stay pressed down. Churches are the exception. They rise tall, reaching to heaven. They are the only buildings many villagers ever enter that feel truly spacious. Arched ceilings, stone columns, windows that let in colored light. The sacred space offers awe, and a reminder of your own smallness. But churches, too, separate. Nobles have seats near the altar. You stand in the back, or kneel on the cold floor. You may not understand the Latin Mass, but the architecture tells you everything you need to know. Even in towns, where buildings grow tighter, the story is the same. Merchants and craftsmen build up 2, sometimes 3 floors, narrow and leaning. They display goods in a street-facing stall, while their families live above or behind. But still, there is little comfort. No heat, save the hearth. No light, save the sun. No soft bed, save a pile of straw. And always wood and fire. Fire was a constant threat. A dropped candle, A cook fire left too long. Towns and villages burned with terrifying regularity. And yet, building with stone was too expensive for most. So you built again, wood, thatch, daub, and hoped. Architecture dictated your behavior. You rose with the sun because your home was dark. You gathered outside because your house was small. You cooked in the daylight and slept early because candles cost money. The buildings didn't adapt to you. You adapted to them. Even social gatherings were shaped by architecture. Feasts in a noble hall meant long trestle tables, packed tightly. A lord on a raised dais. You served him, or waited for what was left. In your own cottage, a feast meant a bit of meat, a rare treat. You sat close together, ate from wooden bowls. There was no dining room, just the same place you slept and worked and mourned. Architecture was not just shelter, it was structure. It held people in place. It was the stone and wood reflection of the world's rules, who had space and who had none. Today, we design for comfort, for aesthetics, for light, for air. You have doors that close, windows that open, heat in winter, fans in summer, clean water that flows, floors you can scrub. You can choose where to live, how to furnish, how to build. You have walls, yes, but not to keep you in your place. So tonight, as you lie in your bed, think of the walls not as barriers, but blessings. They are quiet, they are dry, they are yours. No smoke, no draft, no rats in the rafters, just rest, and stillness, and sleep. Close your eyes, let the quiet settle. Now imagine a time when justice was not blind but watching, always watching. In the medieval world, justice was not a matter of fairness. It was a matter of fear, a tool, not of mercy, but of order, of power, of warning. If you committed a crime, or were simply accused, the system that awaited you was not built for your protection. There were no defense attorneys, no presumption of innocence, no appeals courts. You were not a citizen, you were a subject. And punishment was meant to teach everyone else a lesson. Sometimes that lesson took the form of public executions. They were not hidden, they were events. A thief might be hanged from a gallows erected in the town square. A crowd would gather, children, elders, sellers with meat pies and mugs of ale. Some came for justice, some for curiosity, some for pleasure. Death became theater, and it didn't end with hanging, beheadings, burnings, drawing and quartering, crushing beneath stones. Each method was chosen not just to kill, but to display, to stretch out the moment, to fix it in memory. People learned through spectacle, and so justice was made visible. Other punishments were less fatal, but still public, still cruel. The stocks, a wooden frame that locked your hands and head in place. You would sit, exposed, for hours or days. People would mock you, spit, throw rotting vegetables. Children would laugh. Dogs would sniff. There was no dignity in the stocks. They were designed to remove it. Then there was the pillory, which held you upright, sometimes twisting your limbs. The longer you remained, the more your muscles screamed. But that was part of the sentence. Pain was the point, not for rehabilitation, but for humiliation. Punishments varied by class, of course. A noble might pay a fine, a peasant might lose a hand. A woman accused of gossip could be fitted with a scold's bridle, a metal cage locked around her head, sometimes with a spike placed on the tongue. To speak was to bleed. This, too, was public. Everything was public, because shame and pain were more effective when witnessed, and justice was most visible when it made people look away. Then there were the trials themselves. Modern due process did not exist. Evidence, as we know it, did not matter. Instead, you might be asked to undergo a trial by ordeal. A man accused of theft might be forced to plunge his hand into boiling water. His hand would be bandaged and left to heal. If, after 3 days, the wound was clean, he was innocent. If it festered, he was guilty. Another might carry hot iron, or walk over burning plowshares. In some places, a woman suspected of witchcraft was bound and thrown into a river. If she floated, she was guilty. If she sank, she was innocent and dead. These ordeals were said to be judged by God, but they were, in truth, tests of endurance and luck. The strong, or the lucky, or the well-connected, survived. The rest did not. Even when trials used words instead of fire, the outcome was rarely fair. Confessions were prized, but often extracted through torture. Stretching on the rack, crushing of fingers, removal of nails, the wheel, the boot, the Iron Maiden. Torture was not only legal, it was accepted, expected. To scream was not a sign of injustice. It was part of the process. And so cruelty became normal, ordinary, a shared ritual of power. If you were a lord, you might sit in judgment over your tenants. Your word was law. If you were a priest, you might advise on sin and punishment. If you were a peasant, you simply hoped to avoid both. Because justice did not protect you, it weighed you, measured you, used you as a warning to others. But still, people believed in it, because the alternative was chaos. Without justice, there was no safety, no boundaries, no end to vengeance. So even if the system was brutal, it was preferable to nothing. Villagers attended executions not only for spectacle, but for reassurance. The law, they believed, was doing its job, even if it sometimes took innocent lives, even if it punished the poor more than the rich, even if it used suffering to keep the peace. Over time, some places began to record laws, to standardize punishment, to rely more on testimony, oaths, or written contracts. But progress was slow, and in many places, it never came at all. Centuries passed with the same rituals, the same brutality, the same wooden gallows, rising again and again in the same square. Today, things are different. There is still injustice, still flaws, still pain. But you have rights, a presumption of innocence, a system, however imperfect, designed to be questioned, appealed, changed. You do not live in a world where your guilt is tested by flame or proven by your scream. You live in a world where justice can still be demanded, still be defined, and that, too, is something to rest in, because fear is not your constant companion. Would you survive? It seems like a simple question, maybe even a fun one, something tossed around during a slow conversation or a trivia night. Could you make it in medieval times? Could you farm the land, sleep on straw, live without electricity or antibiotics or indoor plumbing? Could you endure the dirt, the dark, the discomfort? But the truth is, surviving in the medieval world was not just about muscle or willpower. It was about relentless endurance, physical, mental, and emotional. It wasn't a game. It was a daily struggle, quiet and consuming, in a world that rarely gave back what it took from you. Imagine waking up not in your own warm bed, but on a rough mat of straw, laid over a dirt floor. Maybe you share that space with your family, maybe with animals. The fire has burned down to its coals, and the chill of early morning seeps into your bones. There are no blankets fresh from the dryer, no coffee machine humming on the counter, just cold air, the smell of smoke, and the weight of another long, unchanging day. You'd have no choice but to rise with the sun, not because it's peaceful, not because you're refreshed, but because the day's labor begins with the light and ends when it fades. You work because if you don't eat. And even when you do work, what you eat is meager. Maybe a hunk of black bread, a bowl of thin cabbage soup, some leftover gruel. Nothing hot unless you make the fire yourself. No clean drinking water from the tap. Just a jug you filled at the communal well, heavy and sloshing in your arms. As you move through your morning, your body protests. Your back is tight. Your hands are raw, your feet sore from shoes made of rough leather or none at all. Maybe there's a tooth that's been throbbing for days, or a cut on your leg that's beginning to fester. But there is no doctor to call, no clinic to visit, no over-the-counter medicine to dull the ache. There is only hope, and herbs, and prayer. Most people won't understand what's killing you until it's too late to stop. And yet the work doesn't stop for pain. The fields need tending. Animals need feeding. Clothes must be washed by hand, in cold water. Children cry. Fires must be maintained. Water must be hauled. You move through your day without pause because there is no time for anything but survival. There are no breaks, no weekends, no hours carved out just for you. And if you're a woman, your work never ends. It spans the household, the children, the food, the clothes, and the field if needed. You may bear a child without help. You may bury one, too. You may spend years pregnant or recovering, or grieving. Your life, like everyone else's, is measured not by milestones or dreams, but by the seasons and the harvest. But the hardship isn't just physical. There is a mental weight too, and it presses down like the low wooden ceiling of your cottage. You were born into a station. That station does not change. If you are a peasant, you will remain one. Your children, too. There is no climbing, no escaping. Social mobility is not a ladder. It's a wall. And that wall is stone, thick, and ancient. You live in the shadow of a castle. The people inside eat better than you, dress better than you, live longer than you. But you will never be one of them. You may never even speak to them. The Lord may decide your rent, your punishment, your fate, and you can do nothing about it. Justice is not yours. Power is not yours. Your voice is small, and it stays that way. Above it all is the church, towering and ever-present. It governs not just behavior, but belief. You are told what is right, what is wrong, what is dangerous to even think. Superstition is woven into every part of life. You fear disease, yes, but you also fear demons, curses, sin. You believe that illness is punishment, that drought is divine anger, that your suffering might mean something or nothing at all. There is no therapy, no rest, no safe place for your thoughts. You don't have the luxury of introspection, or anxiety, or self-care. You don't have the words to name your feelings, or the time to explore them. You have to push it all down. There is no room in your life for anything but the next task. And yet, people lived. They laughed sometimes. They loved when they could. They endured. But the question remains, could you endure it? Could someone raised in the modern world, with its freedoms and its comforts, survive the psychological strain of a world that expects nothing from you except everything? Because that's what medieval life asked. Everything. It asked you to bear pain without remedy, to work without reward, to suffer without relief, to follow rules without question, to bury your dead and keep walking, to obey, to accept. And perhaps most of all, it asked you to accept not knowing what illness gripped your child, not knowing whether the harvest would be enough, not knowing when war might come, or disease, or the Inquisition, not knowing why things were the way they were. You would live small, and dream small, if you dared to dream at all. Now think of where you are right now. A bed that's yours, clean sheets, a door that locks, light at the touch of a switch, water at the turn of a handle, food stored cold, medicine within reach, books, screens, music, privacy, autonomy. You have rights, options, time. You can ask questions, change course, complain, reflect, laugh, cry, stop. You can rest, you can heal, you can hope. Not everything in the modern world is perfect. Far from it. There is pain here too, but you are not surviving in the same way. Not constantly. Not without tools. Not alone. You are free to live more than a life of survival. You are free to imagine, to create, to breathe deeply and decide what your days will look like. You're not living under the rule of a distant lord. You don't need permission to move or speak, or learn. You are free to rest without guilt. So as this final chapter closes, let the medieval world fall away. Let the smoke from the fire drift upward. Let the stone walls crumble into memory. Let the straw bed dissolve. The stalks vanish. The fear recede. You're not there. You're here. In a world that, for all its flaws, has allowed you space to sleep in peace, to lie still in safety, to close your eyes knowing the morning will bring warmth and light, not toil and pain. You've traveled through the hardest parts of history. You've walked the muddy paths, sat in the cold rooms, stared at the gallows, You felt the weight of a world where life was short and choices were few. And now you can rest, not as a peasant, not as a servant, but as someone who made it through the night, someone who has the freedom to sleep simply and softly. No fear, no hunger, no fire to tend, just breath, stillness, sleep.